second DNF of the season. The virtual safety car prompted Charles Leclerc to pit for the first time, going on to the mediums, which were meant to last him until the end of the race, though that would have been a great stretch. 41 laps on the mediums, with the hards only projected to last 4 more than that. Absolutely impossible. Russell pitted for the first time on lap 24, with Max doing the same 2 laps later, going on to the mediums, and putting Leclerc back into the lead of the race. Charles ditched the one stop on lap 34, dropping to second, and about 20 seconds behind Max Verstappen. And after 15 laps of Charles struggling to catch up to the back of Max, the safety car would negate the gap between the two, after Daniel Ricciardo retired from the Grand Prix on lap 47 due to an engine failure. Both Russell and Leclerc pitted in that safety car period in anticipation of a last lap shootout, but this never materialised, with some criticising the race directors for not red flagging the race. So, after this result, if Max Verstappen outscores Leclerc by 9 points or more in the next race, he will have won the World Championship by Singapore. George Russell also extended his lead in the championship over 5th place Carlos Sainz to 16 points, with his 4th podium in 5 races. He is also only 7 points behind Sergio Perez, so he could end up 3rd come season end. That will be a great result after Mercedes projected heavy losses for this year. 4th place is next, and it's Carlos Sainz, who managed to recover expertly from his 18th place on the grid. He managed to get up into 13th by the first lap, continuing as he began with overtakes on Ocon, Vettel and Stroll, before passing both Zhou and De Vries on lap 9, as well as Alonso at turn 1 for 7th place a lap later. Norris was next on the Spaniards' hit list, and Sainz then moved up into the top 5 after going down the inside of Pierre Gasly at turn 1. And by lap 14, Ricciardo had also fallen foul of the Ferrari driver. Carlos was on fire in the opening 20 rounds of the circuit, but things cooled down a bit before his first pit stop of the race, which saw him go onto the softs, coming out in 8th, behind Sergio Perez, before the Mexican was passed on lap 33, pitting for the final time under the Ricciardo safety car. Lewis Hamilton also recovered to 5th, having gone off like his teammate at the first corner. He slowly made his way through the back markers, moving past Ocon and Stroll in consecutive laps for 11th place. His pace kept him ahead of the McLaren and AlphaTauri DRS train, and he went down the inside of Alonso on lap 27 to get him into the top 6. He pitted alongside Leclerc on lap 34, passing Zhou and De Vries before the Brit pulled off another double overtake on Norris and Gasly, the McLaren driver having come out into the path of the Frenchman after his pit stop, distracting Gasly and letting his compatriot pass the both of them at the Curva Grande. Lewis passed Ricciardo and Perez as well, and cruised home for his 11th top 5 finish of the season. However, he is still slowly hemorrhaging points to Carlos Sainz in the World Championship, so he needs to end his podium drought soon to have a chance of 5th place. Sergio Perez was 6th, another driver who needed to rebuild after starting in 13th, but his start to the race thankfully did not set a tone for what was to come, as the Mexican pitted very early on, his brakes almost setting ablaze in Monza's grueling heat. However, Perez got back into it at turn 4, passing Magnussen and Ocon 2 laps later, as well as Bottas and Schumacher on laps 22 and 24 respectively. He pitted for the second and final time on lap 43 and came home to take 8 points plus 1 for the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. Lando Norris scored for the 12th time this season, having finished 7th in his past 5 trips to the top 10. But this was a far cry from the possible podium from his 3rd place grid spot. Norris had a terrible getaway, dropping to 6th in the opening lap, before falling behind Alonso as well, after going off and over the rumble strips at turn 1. But he redeemed himself against the Spanish veteran on lap 18 at turn 1. Norris pitted for the second time after the Hamilton embarrassment on lap 46, but again had trouble in the pit lane with a 5.1 second stop, and had to pass Gasly and his teammate Ricciardo for his final position of 7th. Pierre Gasly scored for the second time in 3 races, at 8th, at the circuit where he won his maiden Grand Prix 2 seasons ago, moving past Ricciardo, Vettel and Magnussen in the championship to 11th. Pierre started out in the top 5, battling early on with Daniel Ricciardo, and he pitted on lap 19, and was part of the DRS train which so disrupted the chances of the majority of the lesser teams for points. Nick de Vries also had a phenomenal first Grand Prix, finishing in 9th, expertly holding up Zhou Guanyu for the final points position, before Ricciardo's retirement secured his place as yet another rookie to score in his first Grand Prix. And Ricciardo's retirement also made way for Zhou, who scored his 6th point of the season thanks to holding firmly onto the coattails of that DRS train, and added to Alfa Romeo's points tally for the first time since Canada, whilst his teammate Bottas had another nightmarish day, losing part of his front wing in the early stages after contact with Magnussen, and ending up in 13th, his 7th race in a row without points. Esteban Ocon broke his 5-race-strong scoring streak in 11th, whilst Mick Schumacher had his best result since Austria in 12th. Yuki Tsunoda continued his 10-round non-point scoring streak in 14th, whilst Nicholas Latifi could not capitalise on his top 10 grid start for Williams' first double points scoring finish of the season, as he lost 6 places in the opening 4 laps on his way to a P15 finish. Kevin Magnussen was the last of the finishers, having taken a 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, capping off yet another poor day for Haas. Daniel Ricciardo's retirement from 7th place would have hurt the Aussie, who looked on to make a big statement about his still exponential talent to the lesser teams who may now be looking for a driver next season. And Fernando Alonso also retired from a promising points position, pitting on lap 32 to do so. But the least fortunate, team in this race was without doubt Aston Martin, as both drivers retired from the Grand Prix for the first time since they were Force India back in France 2018. Now for my driver of the race, and it is of course Nick de Vries. What a start to his Formula 1 career. P13 in qualifying, P8 on the grid, and P9 in a Williams is astounding, and it proves that he is the most logical decision for that team next year. If they stick with Latifi for 2023, I will be mind blown. Now onto my team of the race, and it's McLaren. Despite the exemplary recoveries from the likes of Perez, Verstappen and Sainz, McLaren stamped their authority upon Alpine in this Grand Prix. Many assumed that Alpine would too cast through the field, and that they would end up beating out McLaren, their midfield rivals, despite their lofty grid spots. But Norris and Ricciardo stayed firm, whilst Ocon failed to hang on, and Alonso was forced to retire relatively early in the Grand Prix. Despite Ricciardo's late failure, he was running in a very prominent position and looked on for a great points finish. So, as McLaren were best of the rest, leaving Alpine pretty much in the dust today, they are my team of the race. Finally, for my struggle of the Grand Prix, and it's Lance Stroll. Sir Lancelot qualified poorly, but he was elevated to 12th after the penalties were applied. However, Stroll could not capitalise, dropping away swiftly from the midfield, having a very slow stop which put him down in P16, and after about 15 laps of nothing for Lance, he was asked to retire the car, a difficult end to a poor weekend. Thank you for listening to F1 every week. Tune in 3 weeks' time for a review of the Singapore Grand Prix.